this is a conversation that I believe is paramount for our community as a whole because there's so many of us who have found ourselves or find ourselves in captivity, and I use that word captivity on purpose, uh, in captivity in some of our relationships, and whether it's professional, whether it's friendship, whether it's a intimacy, but toxicity toxicity is is a real thing. I know. Don't look at me, Roland. It just wouldn't come out. It's a real thing, and I believe it's a battle, it's a struggle, it's a fight that most of us have, trying to navigate in toxic situations and around toxic influences. And the hardest part, I think, sometimes is breaking free from those toxic influences. So, in this conversation, I want to start off with the topic of uh, identifying toxicity. Just rock with me. It's gonna be bad all night because it's just not. I can't roll it off. So, my brothers, my first question I have for y'all tonight is, what are some traits of a toxic relationship?
Before we do that, can we talk about what a toxic relationship is first? Because I don't think everybody really have a and I know all our viewers. I know they're sharp as a tack, but for brand new people, whatever the case may be, can we kind of like identify a toxic relationship before we get into the traits? Because I think that might be important.
Please, please, yes, sir.
Well, I would say a toxic relationship is any person or thing that takes you away from your goals, that takes you away in a negative way, because because of how you allow it. Because those things that we allow in our space, whether it be the things that we spend our time doing or the people we allow in our surroundings to influence uh, our direction. I mean, so when we allow those things and they affect us in a negative way, determined by the direction we're trying to travel, I think it's toxic.
I think one of the ways we can notice a toxic relationship is if you look at there's probably a lot of conflict, right? They're not getting along, just conflict in general, regardless of what's going on. Have you ever seen people and it's like, damn man, like they always arguing or I mean they always got something going on. And not just in personal relationships, but all relationships. So I was just I know we're gonna get into it more, and I didn't know if you really wanted me to answer this question or the other one. So I'm answering the first one, kind of sort of what does a toxic relationship look like? And I would just, start with it looks like a lot of conflict. And then at some point, if you want me to answer this question specifically, I'll come back to this one.
I'm agreeing with Roland with the pulling me away from my purpose thought. Um, but I also don't want to just focus it on purpose because a lot of people are still, I mean, not purpose, calling, because a lot of people are still trying to find what they're called to do under the umbrella of the purpose. So any involvement that does not allow us to grow to the point of flourishing and thriving, anything that keeps me stagnant, keeps us stagnant. We've gotten into just a rudimentary routine, to me, can be toxic because there is no growth to it. Now, the other side to it is that there could also be a lot of um, it deteriorates the relationship. So anything that deteriorates from that perspective as well. So again, when you look at a relationship, a connection that you're supposed to have is supposed to grow. So if it's not growing, there's something that's preventing it from growing. And then the other side to it is that it's dying as well. So you look at the both of those in perspective, those to me identify toxic relationships. Now, getting after this particular question, um, manipulation is one of the traits that you will find in a relationship that can be toxic. Um, neither one of the partners actually adding value to the other, in my opinion, can be toxic because you're not helping to, you're not esteeming the other person higher than yourself. You're not uplifting them. You're not edifying them. You're not pouring into them so that they can grow and be the best version of themselves in a relationship, and vice versa. When in the art of communication, you start looking at things such as constant criticism. Constant criticism is another trait that exists in a relationship because it tears it apart. And again, it's a difference between correction and criticism. Let's not conflate the two. Correction is a thing that moves you closer to what you're called to do, and a thing that has the ability to actually make you be better. Criticism is just me telling you what I see. That's all. Like nothing else to it. And it's not just me telling you what I see. It is me telling you what I see to a detriment, and probably tying it to you and tearing you down in the midst of doing so. So that, in my opinion, is what toxic relationship is, and some of the traits that go along with it.
I like that you brought up growth, but to add on to what you were saying, because some people think, oh well, if it ain't growing, and then they'll see that their relationship is growing. But Mo grows. Mo is a growth. Assist is a growth. And sometimes we have people and things in our lives that allow us to grow in the negative. So that growth is something that becomes death to us and not life. And anything that grows in the negative or doesn't grow, as Coach said, it falls into that realm. So when we're looking at those things, we got to realize that, yeah, we may be growing, but which direction are we growing? Are we growing to a positive or to a negative?
Yeah, I want to add to and answer the question. What are some traits of a toxic relationship? Um, Coach, it said manipulation, so I was like, I had to go with something else, and so I kind of went with lack of effective communication and the behaviors that are displayed due to the lack of communication, right? So what I mean by that is there's a lack of communication between person A and person B in a relationship, and because there's a misunderstanding or because the communication hasn't been properly given to the person and to where it's understood. And now there are certain behaviors that are being displayed, which are causing more problems to the situation. Maybe an example could be, I walk in and, my wife's upset about something, right? She doesn't tell me what's going on. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, nothing, ain't nothing wrong. Right. So I'm just like, all right, well, I'm going to go on about my day. Then I'm over here playing the game. And then she walked by, and she like bring me my food or something. And she slammed my plate down. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she like, oh, nothing, ain't nothing wrong. You know what I mean? And then now I'm meeting, I'm like, dang, really? Like, what's going on? And she like, well, remember when you said something 2 weeks ago? You know what I mean? So it's because of the lack of communication or the lack of effective communication, because whatever was going on couldn't have been said and talked about 2 weeks ago, but you held on to something, and now you are displaying a certain behavior because you didn't effectively communicate what the problem was. We didn't get to a solution about it, and now you got an attitude about something, so that's what I mean by the lack of effective communication, and then the behaviors that go along with that lack of that effective communication. So that's what I want to go, and that's what I think of some of them toxic traits of a relationship.
And let me just, if I may, if I can,
Mhm.
add to what the consistency coach is saying there. I think another aspect of um, toxic relationships looks like the ineffective establishment and maintaining of boundaries, right? When we do not have boundaries in relationships, that has a potential to lead to toxicity. That's the word, get it, toxicity. And the other side to it, the other side to it is that when we have those boundaries established, when you know of my boundaries and you intentionally like come across my boundaries, I have a responsibility to defend my boundaries, to remind you of what those boundaries look like, however I choose to do it within that scope and that space and time. for you to acknowledge the fact that I reminded you of something I told you about previously and then get upset with me in the midst of reestablishing and reconfirming my boundaries, that by itself can be toxic. Everybody should have, every person in a relationship should have boundaries. If they're not established, if they're not identified, and if they're not maintained, that can lead to toxicity. That goes back to the the effective communication piece. That goes back to the external relationships as well, because external relationships, when it comes down to those core relationships, can be toxic as well, especially if it doesn't add to those relationships. So all of that can exist within the space of relationship.
Man, I'm loving it. I agree, and I can say the word is just that getting that toxicity is out of there.
I got it, man.
Anyway,
You from New York is
I
like
think
speaking Spanish.
I think it's the New York in me. It's the way I talk, and I'm trying to combat it. That's all right. But man, I wanted to bring, because you talked about um manipulation, and to me, I feel like that's one of the most common things we see. Uh, and Sister Nodella, she put out a couple of attributes. She said controlling, abusive, verbally and mentally, and or emotionally. All right, and when you look at this, for me, I just see manipulative. I'm trying to control. I'm trying to manipulate your movement. I'm trying to manipulate your behavior. I'm even trying to manipulate your thoughts by the word that we don't like to use, gaslighting. That's just another form of manipulation. Make you feel like you're the reason why I'm treating you so bad, or why I'm doing you the way I'm doing you. So when we talk about mental and emotional abuse, to me, all of that falls under the umbrella of manipulation. Uh, if the relationship, for me, I see a relationship. I tell people, let's throw out this 50-50, and let's go 100-100, because neither one of us, we don't exist in the same plane. We're, it, it's just the nature of things. We come together in unity because we bring different things, different attributes to making this 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 cohesion relationship move forward. So in order for that to happen, we have to be 100% in on what we do. That's how I look at it. And so it's when it's not about us both putting in effort, and it's about, no, you bring everything and I just sit here and enjoy the fruits of your labor, then that's toxicity. That's toxicity. That is manipulation. I'm gonna fight it. I'm gonna get it. So I do love you. Thank you, Sister Odell. I do love that you brought that up. But that is, to me, that's what manipulation looks like. Any any further thoughts before we move forward?
I think we had another comment too. Um,
Is that Lisa?
yeah, one trait I believe we don't talk about most, and that can cause toxicity in relationship is being stuck in a state of nostalgia, living in the past. I like that because again, my current state of being, I am constantly in a space of remembering or reminding you of who you were 10 years ago. Well, life has happened to the both of us. I should not expect you to be the person that you were 10 years ago. I should learn to appreciate the person who you are now, and vice versa. But staying stuck in the past is stagnant, not only stagnant to who we are right now, but detrimental to who we were supposed to be in the future. So I definitely like that statement as well.
What if I don't like the new you?
Say more, sir.
Um, oftentimes, myself included, after divorce, a lot of times we find out that, the person we married and, the person who we were when we got married is no longer the person we are, 14, 15, 19, 20 years down the road. So what happens, in a relationship when that person grows and you no longer like that person anymore. You don't like the person that they've become. You know what I mean? And you're in a relationship, what happens then?
Can, can I compound that question?
Yeah.
Because because I hear you, but for me, so this is where I'm at with it. I think sometimes we marry people like the promotion system. You promote off of uh what someone can become, right? And I think sometimes half the problem is I don't think we necessarily like the person we started off with. We saw who we thought they can become. Like we tried to make them who we saw them to be instead of actually seeing them for themselves. Could that be a part of the issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think all things are possible. I think that that could definitely be a situation. Absolutely. I was just wondering, because if if we think about relationships in general, the person I was when I met you guys, 2 or 3 years ago is not the same person I am now. We all have changed. You know what I mean? We all have grown. We all have learned new information. We've all, got, real intimate with each other when it comes to personal things and conversations, over the last few years. And we've learned a lot about each other. We've learned a lot about, different people in the chat, and the people in the chat and the people watching have learned a lot about us. But, you know, how does, so how does it end up whereas people don't like each other? I guess that's another spin on it. How is it that, you know, people end up after divorced after so many years? You know, how much of that is due to the person growing and you not liking the person that they grew into?
I think that that doesn't happen overnight. It didn't just happen when you found out, oh, I'm this person. That happened over time. And over time, neither one of you did the work of the relationship. So now when you get to a place and you start growing and you looking like them, like this dude is a bum. She's a bum, or however you may phrase it. But now you're looking like, hey, I'm elevating myself. I'm doing the things that I need to do, but that person isn't putting in the work, so, to your perception. So sometimes it could be twofold. Sometimes that person is just who they are, and you're now just finding out. You're just coming to grips with it. Other times it could be that there were two immature people in a relationship and one is finally maturing. So that, or they just grow to a point like, man, we just got together off the physical and we didn't really like each other in the relationship to be where it's going. So we just decide to part ways. So that's not necessarily a one key fits all lock thing. I think that's a multifaceted question with multifaceted answers.
Yes, I agree. Because I got some questions, lots of them. Like, first and foremost, what did you learn about each other before you got into this committed relationship? How long did it take you to get into this committed relationship? At what point did we decide that growth wasn't a joint venture, that it was an individual thing? Like Nick D said, did we not communicate in the midst of doing so? Like, there are so many questions to be answered in relation to this. I think as it pertains to the question without any of the other answers, I think I'm reminded of an old saying, and I think pretty much everybody here probably has heard it. The family that prays together stays together. Well, I have a different spin on that. The family that doesn't grow together grow apart. So if when one person decided to go on a growth path and they did not include the other person, or the other person elected not to be a part of that, or said, well, I'm just going to focus on this right here and I'm going to focus on your thing, and then we'll come back together at the end of the day because my job is more important. I put so much time into this, and blase, blase, flip, or whatever that looks like. And then this person say, you know what? I want to be a better version of me. I'm going to study this. I'm going to study this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do all these other great things. Both people are growing, but they're growing in two separate directions, which in essence they grow apart. So when you look at stuff like that, and when stuff like that begins to happen, in essence, one person has the potential to value the relationship because they're looking at personal growth and development, things of that nature. But then the other person, well, they're focused on their career. And so the career becomes more important. So they're great at work, but then they come home and they might be a terrible partner. I think a lot of times we get into situationships with our own perspective of what it looks like. And the things that we see that manifest in real time become the disappointment that exists when they don't necessarily see their vision of relationship come to fruition. And I think that becomes the separation piece. And then all types of this toxic stuff that we just got finished talking about starts hitting the table.
and
Seems like
and
it's
that's what
wise to pick well. I was saying, can you hear me? Oh, I was saying it seems like it's very wise that you pick well and you do your homework. You know, when you're looking to get into relationships with people, whether that be a romantic relationship or even with your friends and associates and your wolf pack. You know, because if you pick the wrong person, like, and you got one person that's willing to grow and the other person that's not willing to work on themselves, then I mean, eventually you guys are going to grow apart. And you know, it just goes to show how important it is that we get the right information from wherever so we can make the right decision when it comes to picking people that are going to be part of our lives.
I agree, but I also think that that can make people think that, hey, I got to choose somebody that's where I am in relationship. Whereas you may have to choose, like, say, if you're good with money and I'm not, we can still
Mhm.
be in relationship. But when it comes to money, we have to know which person leads this conversation, which person is leading here so that there can be a benefit. Because if not, I will bring you down and you won't necessarily bring me up. So we can still be in relationship, but on that plane, we have to know, hey, the leader in this area should be you. This is your strong suit. I can't
Yeah,
try to lead there.
yeah,
and and I think that's exactly what I was talking about when I talk about were we looking at who we thought the person could become, or did we look at who the person was, right? Because I'm a firm believer that the growth that you're going to go into in time, that the Most High has already put part of that identity in you, right? Um, I talk about me all the time. Roland met me what I don't know how many years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago now, 7 years ago. All right. Yeah. And so 7 years ago, people look at my walk now and they're like, man, how did you come from this to believe in something totally different? How did you come from this to now believing and seeing this? But if you knew me 7 years ago, and Roland met me 7 years ago, so this was even 10, 12 years ago. If you met me years ago, I did not, my walk with the Most High has always been something is not right and we need to fix it. And so when he met me, I was pushing. I was already away from the holidays and all this other stuff because I felt like it was polluting what we called holiness, right? And but that trait in me to search was who I always was. I just didn't know that it was going to grow to where it's at now, but that identity of that person was there. And so I think when we get into relationships, we're not truly looking at the person for who they are, but for who we want them to become. So when they begin to grow, we're looking at them like you're not the person that I married. You're not the person. They're the person. They just evolved in what the Father was already making them to be.
Mm, um, different perspective. Okay. Um, I don't necessarily agree that I need to marry the person who you are right now. I think I need to be able to. I think it's important that I be able to see the potential of who you can become. If I stay fixed on the person who you are right now, that creates the opportunity for the nostalgia thing that we just got finished talking about, right? The person who you can become based upon getting to know you, conversations that we're having, seeing the things that you're currently doing, so forth and so on, that helps me to understand whether we're on the same path. So think about it, like, look at it from this perspective. There are people who get married very young, 18, 19 years old, right? A large group of that population don't make it. But then there are some in that population group that does make it. So they've seen that person at the earlier stages of their life on the struggle bus, robbing Peter to pay Paul, eating ramen noodle for dinner, things, all that stuff. But then once they practice the power of stick-wittedness, right, over the course of time, they've seen that person blossom and flourish into a new creature. So did they marry the person that ate the ramen noodles, things of that nature, or did they marry the future aspect of who that person can become? See, I think we missed the mark right there. I don't think. Okay, I'll put it out there. I would say it like this. I think the foundation of every relationship is faith. The problem is that we don't necessarily see it that way. So what does that really mean? That means that we need to be able to point our belief system in the direction of hope for a great outcome. I think too many times we stay fixed into the here and now. And then when the here and now looks different 5 years from now, 10 years from now, then we become disappointed. Well, you're disappointed because you're focused on today. That's the issue. Forget today. Today is just a microcosm of what is to come. So that's the point that I'm saying. And I don't believe that you were saying anything contrary to that. That's why I said a different perspective. A different perspective is kind of like with the Army thing. You get promoted off of potential. The Army promoted you based upon who you have the potential to be, not because you made cutoff. Cutoff is just a thing that you had to go through just to be in that space. But the potential of what you can do with soldiers, with the leadership, with the organization, so forth and so on. That's what that looks like. But I think the same thing exists in relationship. When we stay focused on, back in the days we used to wear our hats backwards, a lot of these kids walking around their pants hanging about. That's not the potential that most people are trying to marry. That's who they are right now. What's the conversation like? What's the parents' background like? What are the core values that they talk about, so forth and so on? If we can focus on a hopeful future, that's the thing we're marrying. And I think too many times that message doesn't get out. We look at what they're doing right now, how much money they got in the bank, what kind of car they drive, all that superficial stuff. That stuff is going to pay. That stuff can fade away. What if that person falls on bad time? What if that person walks out in the street and get hit by a bus? I hope not, but I'm just saying. Are you going to stick with it, or it's going to be like, oh, well, since he or she ain't making this money now, like what can they do for me in the future? And I think that's the large portion of the problem. Again, relationships, period, should be based on faith.
I agree. I don't want to hammer anything, and I do agree with 100% with your point. I just wanted to point out that I'm not saying to marry who you are, but the potential of who you are, who you can become, not the potential of who I want to make you out to be. Because if you married a guy with the baggy jeans and 10 years later talking about I didn't want to marry a rapper, well, you wanted him to be a doctor. He wasn't going to school. You know what I'm saying? Now, if he becomes that, to God be the glory. But I think that's what we do. They go, I like the bad guy image. I like the toughness and the roughness, and I'm gonna turn him into a lawyer. No, you're not. Whatever he grows into becoming is gonna be the potential from what is in him. But
yeah, they say they want the doctor until they realize how many hours that doctor got to work. You ain't never home. You ain't never doing this. You ain't never. I'm just saying.
And how many more people want that same doctor?
that part.
See, and that's why marriage is not just. See, marriage is a business. Period. It's a business. It's a business arrangement. Y'all can follow your heart, but it'll be best for you to follow your mind, because when you follow your mind, you're looking at everything and you're not just in this nostalgic feeling and everything. So it's the same way with as people search for God. That's all religion is you searching for the Most High. And when you search for the Most High, he never called you to search for him. He never called you to just, because he is where he is. He has nowhere to come from. He has nowhere to go to. He's everywhere. So when you look at it as He wants you to know him and to continue to get to know him. Now, the relational value is an intimacy, not just a mere I'm seeking, I'm always looking, because that's what the Muslim is doing. That's what the Hebrew is doing. That's what any of the people out there saying that this is my religion is. I'm saying that I'm looking for God in this. I'm looking for him like this. But when I know him, now what I know is he said this. So now I'm in his word because I'm gaining my relationship through what he said, and I'm learning who I am through what he said and who he says I am. So now the intimacy is a back and forth. So now the growth is us growing together, not me growing one way and this person growing another way. That's why you lead with your head, not with your heart, because your heart will lead you down the wrong path. Your heart will be looking at, oh, I like his baggy jeans, or I like her, this, that, and the other. But when you lead with your head, your eyes are wide open. So you go into it looking not as who they are, they can become, not in what you think or what I think, but in what he says.
Man, I'm loving this conversation already. We already heated. I want to go to question two. I don't think this one's going to take us too long, but I do believe that that is important for those who may not see toxicity in a romantic format. My question is it limited to romantic relationships? And if not, how does that look like outside of the romantic relationship?
I'll go first. I do not think that toxicity is limited to romantic relationships at all. I think it can happen in all types of relationships between at least two people, and I'm going to expand it out to be, more than two people. And what I mean by more than two people, I think sometimes how it can manifest or how it can look like is in abusiveness. And what I mean by abusiveness is abusiveness of superiors to subordinates, making people do certain things they shouldn't do, abusing your power, you know, um, and everything that goes along with that, being in the military for 20 years, you saw it, sometimes being honest, sometimes it was me. Sometimes I was that, sometimes I was that toxic leader, um, good, bad, or indifferent. There was I learned some of those toxic traits from some of the senior NCOs while I was in the military. So even though I didn't necessarily know that it was wrong at the time, you know, when I went back and looked back on some of the things that I did when I was a young E5 and maybe even an E6, there were some things that I was did that would be considered toxic. Um, so definitely, when it comes to relationships outside of the romantic ones, when you look at businesses, when you look at companies, when you look at senior subordinate relationships, you can definitely find some toxicity there. There are definitely some situations where there are some superiors that are abusing their power, and it is very toxic. It's some people there in some very, very, very toxic relationships that are not romantic, and honestly, some of them, somebody might go into it, but some of them is somebody in your family. And that's all I'm gonna say about that one.
I had to write this one down. Uh, I did. I had to write it down so I won't forget. Because is it limited to a romantic relationship? No, because we have things like, and I'm gonna read off what I wrote, like the Passport Bros. We got TV shows, Housewives, Basketball Wives. We got friends that lead you down the wrong path and allow you to do reckless things. We have movies that portray images and likenesses of things that we say we disagree with, but we take part in enjoying it. We got teachers, we got siblings, we got social media, and last but not least, that I'm thinking of right now, so I can shut up, is me, myself, and I. Sometimes I am toxic to me because I allow things to happen where it disturbs my peace, where it disturbs my vision, where it disturbs where I said I was trying to go, because I'm up at night looking online and oh, she's shaking it like that. Or this is happening because it's in me and I haven't done the work on myself to get rid of those things. So my toxic behavior is taking over the relationship that I have with myself.
And that is where I was going to start. The toxicity that exists within me that prevents me from seeing anything that has the ability to nourish my well being and move me in the right direction. So, when it comes down to this question, I think it's an overwhelming response of no, it's not limited to romantic relationships. And it looks like anything that does not allow me to grow or flourish, or anybody that you're in relationship to grow or flourish. Again, the workplace is one of the easiest place to see that unfold, but we struggle seeing that unfold in connections that we have a lot of times going back to the voice of reason point, because we have a nostalgic image of what our relationship used to be. Therefore, the potential for that to happen now is always in my head. I want us to rekindle what that looks like. Well, fire, whether we believe it or not, fire changes the property of its host. So when we try to go back and rekindle something that has already burned out, what we find very difficult is to get the flame going. And we definitely find it extremely difficult to get the flame as hot as it used to be because the properties of it have changed. So when we look at these relationships, whether it's work relationships, going back to Uncle Junior point, whether it's family relationships, I don't care who you are, and I don't care. I mean, no disrespect. I love all people, but we don't view our parents like we used to view when we were growing up. Not that we dislike them, we just recognize that they're human because we probably looked at our parents like superhumans, right? We probably look at our cousins a little different than what we different before we did. Some cousins have elevated themselves to the situation or to the position of siblings simply because of the relationships that we have. Some siblings have downgraded themselves to cousins. That's just the behavior nature of the relationship. So I think when we look at all relationships, I think we realize that every relationship that you find yourself in has the potential to be a toxic relationship, but it also has the potential to be an outstanding relationship that allows more than one person in the relationship to flourish. A big key to see a toxic relationship when a person is all about the prophecy of Janet Jackson. What have you done for me lately? Me, and me. If you're in a relationship with a person like that, that, my friend, is the definition of a toxic relationship because they view the relationship as something to serve them and not them serving the relationship.
Man, y'all on it. They on it in the chat. I definitely agree with everything. Especially when we talk about those who say that they've experienced like toxicity at its finest in the military. You know, the army almost pushed. I don't know if y'all remember, they almost pushed this whole narrative where they wanted subordinates input, and when it came to rating NCOs at one point, because the the AWOL and the unaliving rate was at an all time high at one point. Of course, they didn't want to blame being in two conflicts at one time, but I digress. But but we've seen it in the workplace. You see that control of behavior that, and I think sometimes in the workplace that control of behavior stems from a lack of leadership. So I have to threaten you to behave instead of lead you into the right direction, um, by mentoring, coaching, motivating you. This is all do what I say. I Article 50. I knew NCOs that almost chaptered the entire platoon. I'm like, how your whole platoon getting chaptered? Something ain't right there. you know. But so I do agree. It's not limited. So while we having this conversation, and I really wanted this question because I wanted people to look throughout their lives because they're the, don't say I'm single so I don't have toxic relationships. It might be some of your friends, it might be some of your family members. And the sad thing about it is some of us will stay in those toxic relationships because we either don't want to lose the paycheck, we don't want to lose the friendship, or we don't want to lose the relationship with that family member. But you have to set your boundaries either way. Um, that's why I stand on it. All right. Um, so now that we have the image of toxicity, the characteristics, what it look like, and know that it's not limited to relationships. I want to move forward to what do we do next, um, and and what do we do next is really I want to go from the angle of really preparing ourselves and our audience for the next step, because not everybody's going to admit it and say I'm in a toxic relationship right now, I'm in a toxic situation right now, but how do we begin to move? And that's, to me, that's more important at this moment, to help free to help free it. So the first question I have in this topic is one, can we explain how do we begin to find ourselves caught in these toxic relationships? How do we end up spun up in these webs of toxicity?
Man, religion. All right, and I know that's a very broad statement, but what I mean by that is there were a lot of people who were with toxic people because the church said that they should be with these people. Um, I know a lot of people who stayed in relationships. Um, they didn't necessarily know it first. They may have been part of a certain religion or a certain church, or some may even say a certain cult, and they find themselves with people and they're following rules or guidelines that are in the Bible or perceived or even, what's the word, perceived a certain way. So if they're perceived a certain way, then they're saying this is what this means, you know. So, you know, growing up, as I got older, I heard a lot of stories, and when I was able to go back and look at it, I saw a lot of toxic relationships within the church, and I think some of it had to do with some of the things that they were taught. You know, a lot of things were taught to, you know, just pray about everything, you know, and people stayed in abusive relationships with people for a long time. You know, dudes would be preaching on Sunday and then they would be beating their wife on Monday, and it was about, you know, y'all need to stay together and, you know, just keep praying about it and God going to work things out. So, and that's what I mean by religion. I don't want to be negative about it or shine a negative light on religion. I think religion is a great thing for some people. But I also think that there have been people who have been hurt by that same religion too. And I'm not speaking for all religions. So, um, I just want to, you know, like I said, I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody when it comes to religion or anything that's like that. But I do want to say that there have been some people out there that have found themselves in toxic relationships because of it. Ouch.
Was it that bad?
I guess I can hear a pin drop.
I know, right? Hey, I'll go next. I'll go next. Um, I'm gonna do one and back up because I got plenty actually. Holding on to like antiquated teachings, right? Um, I'm gonna be transparent. Like, you know, I love my parents, um, but I remember, I think I was, um, when I was young, I was really good at math, right? Still pretty decent at math, but I mean, I was really good at math. And it got to the point, so I will never forget, my mother told me, say, okay, great, but don't look for me to help you beyond this point because the stuff that you're working on, I don't know. And I thought that was a very interesting comment that she made. Moving forward, I also found that to be at a later point in time, like, consistent. So no shade or anything of that nature, between my mother or my father. But it's like a lot of things they taught us through they taught us through the lens of what they already knew. But it was very difficult for them to teach us things according to where we were going. We also need to understand that it's a different era. Most of them existed in an era to where the internet didn't exist up to a certain point in their life. Same thing with us. The internet didn't exist to a certain point to a certain point in time. For Gen Zers, which is also called the iGen, the internet gen, they had the internet their entire life. So the lessons that my parents, grandparents would have taught would not have benefited them a whole lot unless it was specifically about biblical teachings, character development, so forth and so on. So a lot of the things that we hold on from our upbringings kind of make it difficult, and it keeps us stagnant when we're trying to bring it into our 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever that looks like. So family dynamics, family teachings, so forth and so on, they may have value within the family itself, but moving forward, some of those things get us caught up into toxic relationships because they were different values then. I think it was during the conversation that we had a few weeks ago where Gaddy made mention of the biblical culture, right? And he talked about this person being raised this way and this person being raised this way and then coming together, but we're not raised the same. And so when we bring those teachings into our relationships, what ends up happening is that I'm trying to hold you accountable for what my mother taught me, and you're trying to hold me accountable for what your parents taught you. Well, what your parents may have taught may not necessarily hold value in the space of the relationship that we're trying to move into, especially if we're trying to pattern it in a particular way that reflects what the Bible teaches. So I want to put that out there, and I'm going to come back later because I got some more.
This is a great question. I think I'm a coach. I got many of these. I think we ignore red flags as well as and that's a buzzword to some people, but we ignore a lot of the things that people we knowingly go into a relationship knowing what we get. You know he a player. You know she for the streets. You know this type of behavior is just who they are right now, but you overlook it. And sometimes we have past traumas that we have not yet dealt with. We have traumas that have gone on our whole lives. We saw it in grandma. We saw it in our mama. It happened to us. And now we go into the relationship thinking that it's the norm. So you are in this relationship with a person knowing that they see you a certain way, knowing that they handle you a certain way, yet you feel like that's just how it is. So those are just a few that lead to poor self-esteem, whichever party is in. And self-esteem can have different effects. Some people may be more recluse, while others may be more. That's sometimes the person that's a bully has gone through some trauma, and that's the reason that they are the way they are. It's a self-esteem issue that they don't see the value in themselves. So if you never see if you can't see the worth in yourself, you will tend to look at others as worthless, and you'll tend to want to belittle them so that you feel better about yourself. And that's not an all-encompassing thing. That's at times I know people who were bullies, and if you follow them home, you see like, man, this person is a bully because of the behavior that his father has put on him. We saw it on Good Time when the boy came to spend the night that was beating up on Michael, taking his lunch money. He went home with, and then they found out, oh, this dude ain't even got no home. He ain't got no lunch money. He don't have these. And those behaviors are reflective to how he treats people. And that's just a couple of examples.
I thought you were about to talk about what you just put in the chat.
Hey, that
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I was going to go, but I'm gonna let you go ahead. And go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I think sometimes people just don't know that they're in a toxic relationship. You know, you know, I'm around, so I'm before, this is my first year. I'm at the high school now. So I'm a high school school counselor now. So I'm around kids, high school kids all the time. And I see some of the most toxic relationships, and it is ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? I turn on the TV and I think people are just oblivious, especially when you're really young. You just don't know. I see kids just, on the phone all the time. It's like dudes are like being late to class and having to go to ISS because like they're walking their girl to class. And I'm just like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like, she's in class on time. You got to spend the whole class in ISS. You missing work, you falling behind. And I'm just like, so it's like, I think sometimes people just don't know. I think early on in my relationship, it was toxic and I didn't know. I just like, this is how it's supposed to be. This is just part of marriage. We're supposed to do this. Couples fight, couples argue, couples get mad at each other. Couples, don't talk for 5 days, or don't get me started on that. Couples don't talk for a week or however long. Couples do this, and couples scroll each other's phone and tell each other what they can and can't watch on social media and what they can and can't watch on TV. And I'm just like, well, these are just part of it. It's part of marriage. It's part of evolving, part of learning who we are, and part of getting over things and making up and going through some other things. So I think part of this, sometimes we find ourselves or people find themselves in toxic relationships simply because they just don't know.
So I agree. No, I'm sorry, Greg, got it. No, I agree. And part of the reason why they don't know because they never seen it modeled. They never seen what a good relationship looks like. And so they've seen several toxic relationships. And because they've seen toxic relationships, they got very good at drama. And when you get really good at drama, when things going good, you create drama in your own environment because you find comfort in drama. Um, I think that's another thing. I think another thing is that most people never go through understanding how to harmonize with traumatic events. Therefore, they have some pent up emotions that they've never got over. They never mourned properly when you had the loss of a loved one, those things of that nature. And so now what ends up happening is that at any given point in time, they're like a ticking time bomb. The lack of emotional intelligence is another one. Like, I think sometimes when it comes down to it, some people don't necessarily know how to assess the situation and then respond in the appropriate manner. So they respond to their mate as though they're an enemy. So that's another thing. Like, you don't necessarily take the time to learn the person that you're getting in relationship with. Therefore, you never took the opportunity to learn how they handle conflict, how they deal with times to which they don't feel the best, like they're the best version of themselves. So all of those things in conjunction with everything else is a part of the reasons why you find yourself in toxic relationships.
Can I throw an alibi? Okay. I, I've been in relationships with people, and I'm not talking about intimate where me and them together, but I've known people throughout my years where they have had trauma in the past where they were over sexualized or situations happen with them. And then they get older and now they're more promiscuous. Now they're the person who's outgoing when it comes to sexual activities and such. That's male and female. And those type of traumas come because when you lack to see that when you look at your value as being this is what they want me for. This is how she sees me. Like Lisa Key said, the six pack and the waistline. When if like a lot of like you see it nowadays, and they think it's cool when bend over to the floor, touch the toe. It's like and everybody dropping, everybody shaking, and they see value in this. It's like okay, I can get them with this. Wow, I can go get a BBL because up here doesn't match. They don't want me for this. So now I'm going off value as what they see, not what I see and who I am. So that whole over sexualized behavior and promiscuity has a lot to do with where we see people uh, in relationships these days.
That's a big thing right there. Um, well, all everything y'all said really. When it comes to the don't know part, I want to talk to the doers out there, because especially when we're talking to men, a lot of men are doers, right? And I'm not saying men are the only ones that end up in toxic relationships, no. Uh, but I only know how to identify this from the male perspective. A lot of men are doers. A lot of men we get into new relationships and we want to do. What problem exists? How can I solve it? How can I fix it? How can what can I show you that I'm dependable, that you can depend on me, you can need me, you can want me to show up and I'm going to show up. A lot of times those are the people that don't realize toxicity is on the horizon because we jump into relationships with the superhero mindset and we don't always do a good job sifting out the other person because we're busy shining and we're busy trying to be available all the time that we're never actually spending time sitting down and looking at the person that we're in these relationships with. And so when that those webs of toxicity begin to spin before you actually step back and look, you'd have been spun up. So I think those type of people who put out their all in the beginning of relationships. First of all, for me, I'm saying slow down. That's my take, right? Slow down. And then secondly, you are the type of person who needs to take their time and truly engage the process of getting to know the other person. Because what you don't realize is you're not giving them an opportunity to show you who they are. Because as long as they're depending on you and you showing up, things look fine. But who they are is going to eventually creep up, and it's going to eventually change the dynamic of the relationship. And so I'm not saying that to negate anything that was said before, but in addition to, I think sometimes you have people who end up in these situations and caught in these webs because they they don't see what's going on because they're too busy trying to be everything for that person. And so sometimes you have to take your time to slow down, step back, don't push, don't you just met that girl. You ain't got to buy her flowers every day. You ain't got to fix her car. You just met her last week. You you ain't got to show up and cut the and some people who just I want to do, and then you look back and you're like, how did we get here? And so that for me that's where that's why I sit with when it comes to how do we get caught up in these toxic relationships. All right. Um, we're gonna jump into breaking free because time is going to get away. Matt, I'm sorry. Uh, there was a comment I wanted to bring up because it is also real. Uh, we don't have to hit on it too much, but Lisa Keys brought up a point about the six pack, uh, and and I wanted to you'll see that will be, but she brought it up the six pack. I think she said that six pack blind you or something like that, and she's joking, but that's real. I don't know. I don't know about the six pack, but brothers, we know what ours are, what we looking at, right? And it'll blind you, and you just be happy that you got you a baddie, and not even realize how toxic you this person is. So I do appreciate that. I know we got to push forward, but I do want to, man. I don't know, if brother Christian Burrows out there. He's a smart brother, but he's a young brother being here. I'm like, hey, what they say? Can't trust a big smile. That girl is poison. All right,
But
moving on.
isn't that the same thing that everybody's talking about right now with Travis Hunter? That's I
Woo!
mean, I'm not talking about the brother. I'm just saying that everybody is talking about his situation, and I think he feels and sure their messagings can be packaged different, right? But from his perspective, and we've all been in his shoes ish, not necessarily in his shoes, right? But in his shoes ish, to where somebody's seen something in someone that you were dating at a very young age that you yourself couldn't see. It kind of goes back to the old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, right?
Mm.
So it's like when you're in something, you really can't see it that well, but you're the thing that attracted you to it, that's really all that you see in that particular moment. So not bringing that up to hold that as a particular talking point, but it's the exact same thing.
I, whew, yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't know. I don't take sides on that situation because
I take sides on it
I'll take sides on.
all day
I
long.
don't. I
But I
don't.
also will say that he is young, and I understand it.
Yeah,
That's both of them. That is young behavior. That's how these kids roll nowadays. It's different than what we did, but I chalk everything up right now to young behavior. It happened every generation. It ain't gonna never stop. Athletes and women. It's just part of it. It's
And
young behavior.
and when you ain't attracted to me until you find out I'm about to have a payday, the writing on the wall. I told people if they get married, this is just me. I ain't Nostradamus, nobody like that. But if they get married, 2.5 kids, she out the door. She gonna do a type Miss Tiger Woods.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm not disagreeing. I because I don't know. And what I say I don't know is once someone tells me you don't know my significant other like I do, you all right. I do know that this is modeled behavior that we've seen before, and so I do have an opinion on the matter, but at the same time, you're right. But like you said, I chalk it up to young behavior. So that's where I go. He got to
But
live and
here's the
learn.
deal. If it freaking works for them, who am I to say? I'm in an age gap relationship. I'm in a different cultural relationship. 10 years in.
Now, I would say if I'm with Coach Prime and I watch him run off the field because his ex-wife popped up, I'm definitely being careful. Uh, I'm just saying. But moving forward, let's get over. I see you. I see you stewing. I see. Uh, but we got it. We got to run. We got to run. Let's go into breaking free. It's, man, uh, because I do want to get into the part of this conversation where we begin to talk about how to break out, how to get free. Um, and so when we talking about toxic relationships, let's go to question number 5.
Man, ain't no numbers on here.
Oh, there ain't no numbers on there. Yeah, I'm not bad. You got the numbers. Uh,
Is
uh,
that it?
yes, yes. What are some reasons that people stay in toxic relationships?
Because they don't know no better. That's all I got.
Because I love her. They don't know no better.
Dependency.
I
I
like
mean,
the answers, but I guess because some people don't want somebody else to have them.
yeah.
That's true. Could
Man,
it be depend? What about that?
could it be what?
Dependency, like
Absolutely. Dependency is one. Dependency was Dependency can come in different types of forms too. Dependency may not necessarily mean financially. Dependency could be meaning you depending on this person to remain in your life so you can have a relationship with your kids. So some people stay in relationships for their kids. Some people stay in relationships for a better lifestyle. Some people stay in relationships for a better future. Like we were just saying, maybe some people get in relationships, toxic relationships, because they know that there can possibly be a reward at the end of the tunnel. So if I can go, I'm just saying, I'm going to use Travis Hunter, but not Travis Hunter. I'm going to talk about the behavior, not necessarily him. So what happens sometimes is there are toxic relationships, and what I mean by toxic, I'm going to use the word manipulation since we talked about that. There are people who are manipulating. I'm not saying she is, but there are people out there who are manipulating athletes, um, getting them, trapping them. Um, I guess what I'm saying is they're putting on a role or they're acting a certain part so they can have a certain outcome. So they're manipulating athletes so they can have a better lifestyle at the end of the road. So they'll get one, they'll get them pregnant, not get him pregnant, but they'll have a couple kids by him, get married, yada yada yada. Then, like you said, 2.5 years, and then they're out the door and they got half the money and alimony and child support for a long time. You know what I'm saying? So, um, yeah, that part right there.
And that works on both sides because I
Yep.
know I've seen where, and not on that level because you don't see rich people do it like that too much, but you will see it where a man will get a woman pregnant simply because it entraps her. So now, oh yeah, it entraps her. Where
Oh,
if,
I've heard. I know Coach looking, but I've heard dudes say that too.
yeah,
Like, girl, you want to have my baby? I'm just like, bro,
like
like you read what you saying?
exactly. Listen to 50 Cent, have a baby by me, be a millionaire. You can't be a
Go
$50
half on the baby, R. Kelly.
see, half on this, that, and the other, and then you have these children, and you fed her a bunch of lies, and now the situation comes for you to be responsible for what you said, and you out the door. So that's a toxic behavior because all you were looking to do was sow your raw oats, as they said in the movie.
Uh, I'm still stuck with I don't know no better. They don't know no better. I mean, I get everything that everybody's saying, but it all equates to the same thing. They don't know no better. I mean, if you intentionally get a person pregnant, if you were like in the Travis Hunter situation, like all of it is based upon, I really hate to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. All of it is based upon ignorance, the lack of knowing anything better than doing so. Um, but again, I go back to the notion of seeing toxic relationships as a norm. And when you see toxic relationship as a norm, it's like, yeah, we argue, we fuss, and we fight, but we come back together eventually. Okay, like I think all of these things, um, matter, especially the seeing toxicity as a norm. Um, there could be a side of it to where they don't want to lose them. I get that part, but I also think there is the degree of like embarrassment as well, because probably in the beginning when they started the relationship, they paraded them around like there was a trophy, and they tell everybody, "Oh, I'm in a relationship." Get like what's that movie, The Colors Purple? I was married now. You know what I'm saying? All that stuff. And then when it don't work, it's like there's a degree of embarrassment that goes along with the relationship ending. So they stay in it even though the relationship is toxic, and they don't necessarily have the tools to work out the toxicity that exists within the relationship. So I think all of those things can be true within the scope of it. Um, and I will also add in the fact that there is a stigma in our community about divorce. So based upon going back to Garfield's point, based upon a lot of church teaching, they are fearful of getting divorced because it kind of puts a stain on the family dynamics and things of that nature.
Man, yes, yeah, so I agree. I agree with everything everyone has said. Um, but for me, I don't know. I think the dependency is where I hang my hat. And I think it, like you said, it all do stem on they don't know no better. But I've seen it too many times. Like it's people I'm like, I know you know that this relationship is toxic. I You got to know that this is abuse because we see his fist touch your eye and like that's not abuse to you. It ain't about, but some of it is. I I can't live without being in a relationship. I have to have someone here. I have to have someone next to me. And so some people will put up with anything just to say that they's married now or that they in a relationship and they're not single. You know, whatever the scenario is, you know, because the kids, I don't want to leave my kids, or I don't want to snatch the kids from their father or from their mother. You know, we have a lot of scenarios of what dependency looks like. Uh, is it toxic to stay in a relationship so that you don't lose half of your assets? I know a lot of men that do that. that we there's a mantra out there for that for men at least. We say it's cheaper to keep them.
And it's easy for people without stuff to talk about this, but and that's one of those things where that's why before you get into the foolishness, you should do the work on yourself. You should manage you enough to where your growth only brings people around you that are headed in your direction. That way, the foolish see it's easy when people are moved by what they see or their feelings and they or their senses. I'm sorry. It's easy to manipulate those people. People that are moved by their feelings, their senses, and everything like that, because it's about what they see, it's about what they hear, it's about what they taste, it's about what they smell, and it's about the sensory within them. But people that actually are cognizant of where they are, who they are, and where they're going, it's hard to manipulate those people. That's why you won't see a lot of foolishness around those people. So with that, I've seen and I've been in that situation where like, hey, I can't lose this. I'm gonna lose my retirement and the kids, and then I'm gonna have to pay for this because you start looking at what you lose instead of what you gain, and you don't realize that you are part of this toxic relationship, not just in it. You're part of it because if you're in it and you know this is going on, you know this is a part of it, then yeah, you got to be a participant.
Oh, I got you. Hey, hand me the baton. I'm pick up right where you left off. Exactly. Like when you talking about the other person is part of this. Exactly. So my question would be this. I've often heard women say, I'm just going to use women. This could be gender. This is not gender specific, but I've heard women say, my husband won't give me a divorce because he know I'm gonna get half of his stuff. So my question is, why are you trying to take half of this man's stuff? You know what I mean? So if he's staying in a relationship, and not Adrian, but her question was, is it toxic to stay in a relationship so that you don't lose half of your stuff? And like someone else said, it's easy, to talk about this thing when it's ain't your stuff that someone's getting half of. You know what I'm saying? So I think my question would be is why is it that he don't why is it that he's willing to why is it that he feels that he has to stay in order so he don't lose his half of his stuff? Me personally, you can have all this stuff. I can get it again. If I want out, I'm out. You can take and keep everything you want. You know what I mean? You can keep these assets because when I want out, I'm out. So but that's just me. But I think that, like Roland was saying, I think that there's another side of this, and you may be part of that toxicity too. Not saying that you are, but you very well may be part of the solution, part of the problem.
I'm gonna answer this question like Ice Cube did on Friday. Yes. That's the answer. Yes, it is toxic. I'm sorry. Get out of it. Go and get. You know what I'm saying? Listen, there is no amount of assets, stuff that is worth your peace of mind. I can't stress that. Like, peace should be the most important thing to any person. And if for whatever reason they value stuff over peace, yes, that is toxic, because at the end of the day, I mean, let's just be completely transparent. You're in a situation where it's constantly spiraling downward. You don't see a way out. No one is actually actively working towards improving the situation. So I mean, it literally goes back to everything that we said in the beginning. So when you look at stuff like that, yeah, it is definitely a toxic trait to continue to stay because you fear losing your stuff. Like, really, get more stuff.
Uh, I agree with everything that was said. Yes, it is. And why? Because if I'm unhappy and I'm only staying to keep my stuff, that means I'm going to stay and I'm going to eventually mistreat you because I know you don't want to leave this relationship, so you ain't going nowhere. Most people who do that is because they believe that you're not going nowhere, right? And as long as I do X, Y, and B to keep them in the house and keep them here until at least until the kids grow up, and then we can separate. So I don't have to pay. Uh, if depending on how many kids you have, you got one kid that's 24% of your of your what's it, your net, all right? So no, of your gross, yeah, you're right. 20
Um,
24%.
one kid. Well, I know the 60% rule. But go ahead.
Well, it ain't gonna go above 60%. But one kid is. Oh, I paid that 24%. I know. I paid it. I paid the one kid and the two kids at 27% as well. So it, when you know you make this, but you got to live in the shoebox just so you can have some place to bring your kids, and that's all you can afford. And everybody says you shouldn't have had kids. Well, nobody. I don't think people. Let me not say anybody, but people who have children in marriage don't have children with the mindset of separation. So I think that's a disingenuous statement to make. I hope no one has children in the marriage with the mindset of separation and like that. But so that's why I go with it. I say yes, it is because all you're gonna do is move bitter in that relationship. Um, so uh, the next I think I got time for one more, right? Uh, let me see if I can slide one more in. Uh, yeah, let's go with the next one. Um, are there steps that a person needs to take to start separation in a toxic situation? Or you could say that it's as
Yep.
simple as just get out.
No. First of all, it depends on the level of toxicity and how well you know the other person. The other person might be crazy. The other person might be a stalker. So I think first of all, you have to be able to read the room and know who and what you're up against. Are there steps that a person needs to take? Absolutely. If they decided that they're going to get out, you know, I think it's kind of hard for me to say what someone should do. I definitely think that there should be a plan. I definitely think that there should be a well thought out plan. I think that it should take some time to really think about, because if you plan on leaving a toxic situation, it's toxic for a reason. You know what I mean? And the other side of that, and when you leave, you don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen. So especially if you are with the wrong person or you're trying to leave, you know, somebody who's, maybe prone to domestic violence or anything else like that. So having a support system, letting the right people know. I think at the end of the day, man, I just want to say that, need to have a plan. You know, one of the things we did in the military is before we went on like missions or lanes and, you know, training and stuff like that was um, we went over things. We looked at scenarios. We say, well, if this happens, then this is what we're going to do. If this happens, then we're going to do that. You know, so I think there needs to be a lot of questioning and answering and scenarios played out, and you know, maybe even talking to a lawyer or whoever it is you need to talk to. But there definitely are steps that need to be taken. How that plan looks for you, I think may have to get some people involved with it, but definitely need to have a plan and need to be very well thought out.
I think that there definitely has to be a plan, especially depending on the responsibility level within the relationship. Because if you have children, if you have properties, if you have things that you know you have to account for, you can't just be like you in the 90s J-Lo movie enough and pack your bags and dip, because it ain't gonna work out like it happened for J-Lo. You have to have a plan, but not just being strategic to take what you think you deserve, but to see, first of all, within any marriage or whatever, you have to see whether it's salvageable or not. And if you determine with communication that it's not salvageable, then yes, you develop your plan. It's not just an exit plan, but it's a plan for you in your life. I mean, because I always say that when you sever the relationship with the parents and you have children, you may cut the relationship, but you bleed on the children. So that does take into account. So definitely having a plan helps so that you and that person can be on board, because you don't have to agree with it to go along with it. If we're separated because I say I'm out, and I always say once a woman is done, and R. Kelly made the song, when a woman say it up, it's over. So definitely have a plan.
When a man fed up, it's over too. Doggone it. All that is great. The first thing, the number one thing, the most important thing, make a decision. That's the biggest thing that people fail to do, is make a decision. Make a decision that you and toxicity should not be in relationship together, period. Make a decision, and then after making the decision, and understanding what the word decision actually means, decide to cut off all other options, right? Which means that, oh baby, I'll do better. No, too late. We already had time. We already went through that. There was plenty of opportunities to do better, all that other great stuff. So I don't care, woman, man, I don't care who you are. When a person is fed up, they're fed up. That's the answer. I don't care about no R. Kelly. R. Kelly is the last person we need to be quoted about a relationship anyway. He in a relationship with kids. Shoot. Come on, man. What are we doing? I'm just saying. At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, make a decision and move in the direction of the decision that you make. The next time I say is grow up. It ain't that difficult, man. It gonna hurt. Get over it. So did falling off a bicycle when you was a kid. I think that's one of the biggest issues. I don't like how I feel. So who cares? Get over it. It hurts worse staying in a toxic relationship. So which one is more beneficial? You going through the short amount of pain that you're going to deal with to get out of it, or you continuing to stay with it and go through a lifelong pain, lifelong continuation of the pain, rather. I think that's the two things that people struggle with: making a decision and growing up in the decision that they make. Everything else, support system sound good. You can't support me, because at the end of the day, I get it. The only thing most people in the support system, oh, it's going to be all right. That ain't helping me. It ain't going to be all right until I decide it's going to be all right. That's the thing. Once I decide that moving forward is better for me than staying here, that's when it becomes all right. But as long as I sit around and recycle what I thought the relationship was supposed to be, which is fantastical anyway, when I continue to recycle what I thought it was, oh, we had some good times. Man, cut it out. Grow up. That's it. That's my answer.
Grow up. I love that one. It just is what it is. You have and I don't want to say you have to know when it's over. When it's toxic, it's over. Like, it's- I'm I'm a pull the plug type person, but you know, I'm also I tell people one of my biggest downfalls in relationships have been, you know, I'm a hopeless romantic, I like to say. So sometimes I always feel like there's a way. You know, sometimes you can love a person through growth, but it's just toxic. There's no growth. They're telling you they don't want growth. They want compliance. They manipulate their emotions or they manipulate their behaviors or they manipulate your children, whatever they need to do to get you to move how they want you to move because they don't want growth. They want compliance. And that's it. That's how a lot of relationships get toxic. One party wants total compliance over the other, and so at that point, you just got to know that there's no growth coming. Is nothing but a spiral and depression, head and neck. So, uh, and the words of what's his name, Jordan Peele, get out. Because you're quoting people, get out. And and it sucks. You might lose access. You might pay some child support, but you'll make it. It'll be tough. It'll be rough, but we'll make it. That's all. That's really all I can say. Um, other than that, this is our yep, absolutely. This is our bittersweet moment. As Coach like to say, it's time for our final thought. And
My bad.
now I didn't see it right away, so I was filling in. I was like, so now you did. So we're
I
gonna
thought you
start.
was finished.
Yeah, yeah, I was, but I didn't see it roll, so I was just gonna let them know we're gonna start with our brother, Fullman Dr.
I love it. How to break free from toxic influences and thrive. I think Christ did it best when they brought the woman who was caught in the very act of adultery to him. Uh, he didn't say a word. He knelt down and everything. He was doing his own thing. And then when he came back up, and I'm paraphrasing, you can go read it. I think in John 8, he says, "Woman, where are your accusers?" And she says, "There are none." He says, "Well, I don't either." He says, "But go and sin no more." Whenever you decide to change, don't look back. Don't do it again. Be better, live better. When you're trying to move forward, when you're trying to thrive and get away from toxic influences and that toxic behavior, leave that thing behind and go and sin no more. Sin doesn't mean that, oh, I don't do this and I don't do that. It means that your very behavior, your very nature has to change to where you're moving towards the things that he has set for you. Because you can talk a good game, but how's your walk? So make sure your walk and your talk are in line, and then you'll see the thriving will happen, and those toxic influences will fall by the wayside. That's all I got. Thank you.
I'm a firm believer in relationships. I'm a firm believer that if a relationship can be kindled and it's valuable and it's an asset in your life, that you should try to maintain that relationship. I'm also a firm believer in breaking free from toxic relationships. I also want to say that I think that not everything is toxic either. I think, we talked about a lot of toxicity and things that were toxic today, but some things that are perceived as being toxic is not necessarily toxic either. Structure, discipline, having goals, different things like that, aspirations are not toxic. So I think that sometimes in relationships, people would look at people in a relationship and say that maybe that they're controlling or that they're toxic when in reality they just want a lot more structure and a lot more discipline in their life. So to kind of wrap up my final thought is that look at your situation. If you are in a relationship or you may know someone who is in a relationship, look and see if that relationship is somewhat toxic. And if you have a friend out there who's in a toxic relationship, maybe have a conversation with them, maybe see about trying to get that person some help, because there are a lot of people out there who are in toxic relationships and may not even know it, may not see the life that's been sucked out of their lives. And sometimes, sharing a podcast with them or having a conversation with them can open their eyes and enlighten them about something that may be going on in their life. So that's for my end of my final thought, and have a good evening.
I believe wholeheartedly that relationships is good ground for growth. And at the end of the day, I think both parties in the relationship have the opportunity to grow. I think whenever a relationship does not afford that to happen, then it is probably largely due to the fact that either, like we talked about previously, they don't know, or they have a conditioning that states that toxicity is the norm. That all of this can become problematic. Then, when you start factoring in conflict resolution and all of these things can stifle the relationship itself. And eventually, the continuation of people existing in an environment to where it's a lot of back and forth, arguing, fussing, fighting, whatever the case may be, they don't necessarily have a joint goal for the relationship. Then what you will find is that ultimately they're going to start growing apart, and that's how you get third parties being introduced into the relationship. A lot of times people tend to put certain aspects on thing and say this is the worst thing that can actually happen to me as it pertains to relationship, but in all actuality that becomes a result of what is happening in the relationship. Not 100% of the times, but a lot of times it is. So I think every person that is either in a relationship or aspiring to be in a relationship, they need to take a long hard look in the mirror and ask themselves a few short questions. Number one, what is my perspective of growth and what does that mean to the relationship? Number two, how can we do this together, or am I open to growing with, in conjunction with another person? And number three, am I seeking to add value or am I looking to be valued? That's the thing. When you start getting answers to these particular questions, then that can reveal to you where you are in the space of relationships. A great thing to do for you to do is look at your external relationships, your friends and things of that nature, right? Do those relationships, like how do you fare in those relationships? I don't really believe that a person who struggle in the space of relationships, whether we're talking friends or whatever, can actually thrive in the space of intimate relationships, where, especially when you don't have any evidence to where you've are thriving in any other relationships. Now, I'm not saying that every relationship has to thrive. I don't think that's a good comparison, but at least you got to have a good relationship in your life. That should be evidence of how you show up in relationship. Do the work on self. That is key. If you have never done any personal work on self, then how do you think you're going to fare in an environment that mandates growth? That's the other thing I want to add to it. So again, I can go on and on and on about this particular conversation, but at the end of the day, I do believe that relationship is the foundation for growth when it comes down to two people trying to come together as one.
I don't think it gets any clearer than what my brothers have already laid out. Um, but I would say relationship is something that we must continue to work at, and grow at every day. Even in the toxic relationship, you should be able to look back and see where your strengths were, where your weaknesses were, where you can get better at, right? Uh, and and not just focus on how the other person did you wrong. And so that this way, when we move forward, you left that situation better. Uh, but we have to do the work early, in the beginning, before we get committed. We have to know if this thing is something that I can nurture, that we can nurture, and that we can grow in, or is it something that is going to drain me and give nothing back to me, right? And we have to know that that's a real thing. There are some people who are so fixated on putting into a relationship that they don't understand that something is supposed to come out as well as go in. All right. So if I'm putting in and nothing is coming back out, then I'm actually putting into a bank that's stealing my money. All right. If you invest in and there's never an increase, maybe you're investing into the wrong thing. And so we have to move and put our resources, our feelings into something better, into something else, and grow from that. All right, because you are important, and in order for you to put the relationship first, you have to be continuously being fed as well. Uh, but that's all I got for this evening. Um, I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank the panel, man. Y'all be making me sound like I got some good questions because y'all brothers be on it. Felt like I did my homework. 'Cause, right? Yeah, they all pointing at each other because they all know that. Hey, whoever is pointing their finger, you got the juice. Let me stop. Uh, but I appreciate y'all. I appreciate the chat. We have the livest chat on YouTube, man. I'm telling you, it don't matter. We got 6,000 or we got three in there. It's always lit, and so we thank you and we love y'all and we appreciate y'all support. So listen, right here beneath me, you can see all of what we have going on here in this community. Please tap in. If you are new to this community, go ahead and do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. At the end of the day, it does not cost you anything to subscribe. Just click the subscribe button, tap in, go to totalmindsetship.com, and everything you see down here, all right, our Friday podcast, you see our third Saturday podcast. Every Tuesday, you see our Coaches Corner podcast, our Hearts of Women podcast. So just tap in, lock in with us. I promise you, you're gonna find something that's gonna feed you, that's gonna feed your soul, gonna feed your heart. Um, with that, I'm gonna reach up. He said we're gonna stop putting in the work, but we're not. So just coach, is there anything that I missed?
Yeah, so tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m., the Hearts of Women. So make sure that we come out and support them. As always, I look forward to those conversations. I think it's going to be good. So make sure that we support them as well. Also, I want to thank everybody who participated in the goal. We didn't reach our goal, but that's okay. I still want to make sure that I do something special for you guys. So be on the lookout for that as well. Sunday, don't forget TikTok live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It'd be lit. I love it. We have great conversations. I think this week is who? Me?
Thank you.
Oh, it's my week?
Yeah. It's on you.
Oh, okay.
Well,
yeah. Yeah, that is right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot. Look, man, I'll be all over the place. So yeah, make sure that we come out and support. I think it's going to be good because just like you guys heard us last night on the Power Shut Up, we're going to talk a little bit about the habit loop as it pertains to the Bible. And don't forget 2:30 p.m. I'm sorry, 2 p.m. On Sunday is Bible study as well. Tuesday mornings, Tuesday afternoons, Coaches Corner. That's going to be the second part of the habit loop, so you don't want to miss that one because y'all got some homework. And we're looking for y'all to do. You come bring your homework to the show because we want to get some of that great feedback that you guys always have. Greatly appreciate that. And then next Saturday again is reframing the image of relationships. So that is all I got, Brother Gaddy, unless you got something else you want to put out.
No, if there's no alibis, as we say.
Poor man, you got anything? Unc?
Hey, you know what they used to say, if all hearts and minds are clear. We want to thank y'all for tuning in for a great show. And listen, stay available for those you love and for yourself. All right. Other than that, be blessed.